in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you.
GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening. Tonight on Farage, we'll discuss stop and search. The new boss of the Met thinks more of it would cut the murder rate. Some say that would be a horrible racist abuse. We'll talk about prepayment meters, the scandal of the number of people whose electricity was simply cut off over the course of the last year. We'll be joined by Prince Philip of Serbia. We'll talk about problems there on the border with Kosovo and about Djokovic going to the Australian Open this year, not being under house arrest. And joining me on Talking Pints, international lawyer and businessman, the most appropriate named guest I've ever had on Talking Pints. Yes, his surname is Beer. You couldn't invent it. Mark Beer joins me on Talking Pints. But before all of that, let's get the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you and good evening to you. Well, on his first visit to Scotland as Prime Minister today, Rishi Sunak has been holding talks with the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon. The two leaders expected to touch on a range of issues, including the NHS and the cost of living. He's also seeking to discuss with Miss Sturgeon her push for Scottish independence. We're due to get a joint announcement on their plans for government funding tomorrow on that. Full details, GB News. Now, the government says a meeting between the Health Secretary and health leaders today was good and constructive. It comes as new NHS England data shows ambulances took an hour and a half on average to respond to call-outs in the month of December. That's the longest response time on record. Details on pay weren't discussed at today's meeting, but Steve Barclay was warned he must address the workforce crisis. Shadow Attorney General Emily Thornberry told GB News earlier, talks are the only way forward.
Much better, surely, is to use the system that we already have, which is that people negotiate the basic safety levels, and you can see nurses running off picket lines in order to go and help when there is a particular crisis. Now, that's the reality. That's what's always happened. And we know that even if they do pass this legislation, it's not going to help with the current situation. The current situation can only be helped if the government stops playing games, sits down and talks to the unions and negotiates a deal.
Now, there's been travel disruption today for passengers in and around London with strikes on the newly opened Elizabeth line. Members from the Transport Salaried Staff Association and the union Prospect have both walked off the job over pay and pensions. The two unions rejected a 4.4% increase this year. Transport for London has warned of short-notice cancellations and changes to schedules. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, says the government needs to up its negotiation skills.
I don't want to see this industrial action. I want to lead a government that resolves these issues. Under the last Labour government, you didn't have a national strike for nurses. You had fair pay for nurses. And we think that you should be in the room negotiating, sorting out these problems.
The Northern Ireland Secretary said there is still a way to go to resolve the row over the Northern Ireland Protocol. And a warning, if you're watching on TV, there are flashing images coming up. The Irish Premier and the Labour leader both met political parties at Stormont today to discuss the post-Brexit trade rules on the Irish land border. The DUP has been blocking the formation of a proper government until the protocol is dramatically altered or even removed. Those are your latest news headlines. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News, the People's Channel, where now it's time for Farage.
Good evening. It's an argument that, to my knowledge, has been going on since the Brixton riots of 1981. It's all about stop and search and how it's used. Now, the relatively new boss of the Met, Sir Mark Rowley, he has said this week, almost unnoticed by any media channel to my astonishment, but he has said that the increased and targeted use of stop and search could reduce attempted murders and murders in London by 50%. And he says that over the course of the last year, murders in London have fallen, particularly amongst youths, quite significantly. Now, that, of course, you never read that in newspapers because you'll never read a good news story. That's impossible. However, a brief look at the numbers shows that the number of black people that are stopped and searched are disproportionately way higher than their population in the capital as a whole. But that is justified, many believe, by the fact that 45% of murder victims in London are black and 61% of those that are found to be guilty are also black. So is this a debate about race, or is this a debate actually about protecting many members of the black community? One thing for certain, stop and search has always been a very contentious issue. Now, the total number of stop and searches now is half what it was in London when the Tories came to power. Theresa May had a lot to do with that. Again, being fearful that she might be seen as Home Secretary to be racist. Our debate tonight, is Mark Rowley right? Let me know your thoughts, farage@gbnews.uk. I personally think anything that makes London a safer place must surely, from a policing perspective, be the right thing to do. But how do you balance that against the accusations that the Met is institutionally racist? It's not an easy one. I'm joined by Peter Blexley, former Metropolitan Police detective. Peter, you're a veteran. You've been around in all of this. You remember the Brixton riots and the accusations that have come later about institutional racism, etc. Interesting position that Sir Mark Rowley has taken as a relatively new boss of the Met. He's saying this stuff works. Does it in your view?
Undoubtedly. And I really commend Sir Mark Rowley for being courageous enough to tell the truth this week. And you're right, I was there in the dark, filthy, foul, racist days of the late 70s and the early 80s. I was there the weekend, excuse me, that Brixton burnt. And it burnt because of vile policing that was imposed upon young black men.
So there was guilt?
Oh, undoubtedly. Without a shadow of a doubt. Young black men were fitted up and beaten up. The Met Police has come a long way since then, fortunately, as has society. But because there have been so many sensitivities around the subject, I think some police leaders have been afraid to say quite forcefully the truth. And the truth is there is no alternative to stop and search. It works, as your stats, your accurate stats highlighted earlier in this piece. There is 61% of people who are convicted of knife murders are black men, and 45% of knife murder victims are black. So often, stop and search is used in a tactic in areas with sizable black populations to save lives.
OK. Tracy Miller, author, social worker and former gang member. This, as I said, you know, all my adult life, this has been a hugely contentious issue. You can't dispute the figures. Way more black people are stopped and searched. But isn't this, in a way, actually to protect members of the black community?
So, naturally, stop and search is to protect everyone, isn't it? That's the whole point. You stop and search, it shouldn't be about colour. There are also, what's it called, stop and account? Does that exist? I'm asking you.
Well, because you can stop somebody, and if there are no grounds to then search them, it's a stop.
And there's no, legally they don't have to answer your questions, they don't have to stay. So are these statistics coming from just stop and search and not being recorded when it comes to stop and account? Because they are two different things. Like, who's recording this data and is it being done correctly, first of all? Yes, young black youths, adults, they do carry knives. I'm not getting away from that. I'm not going to say that they don't. But it's, stop and search in my mind is suspicion-based power. So is it down to the officer on beat that decides what the suspicion is? Is it coming from higher up? This is what the protocol is and this is who we stop. And that's what my problem is.
I have the answer to both those questions, Tracy. Firstly, it can be conducted by an individual officer under his or her initiative because of what they see, what they've heard, intelligence they may have received, or an incident that might have happened recently, for example. A myriad of reasons why an individual officer or a pair of officers might conduct a stop and search. There is also something called a Section 63 order, which can be imposed by a senior officer, whereby there is no need to have any grounds to stop and search. Officers can merely stop and search anybody within a given area when that order is applied. And that order would usually follow an outbreak of gang violence, maybe a murder, where there is a fear that there will be revenge attacks.
And that is proper street policing, isn't it?
Okay, would it be likely, because we're going to look at stereotypes and bias, again, whether it's conscious, unconscious biases at hand, would it be likely that a young black person would be stopped if they were wearing a shirt or a suit with a belt and a tie? Would they be stopped with the suspicion of having a knife or a gun on them?
Well, the truth is they'd be less likely to be stopped if they're wearing a suit. Yes, no, and we understand that, and we get that. But you know, what Peter is talking about, you know, the police using the powers that they have, is in an area that has been subject in the last 48 hours to gun violence. I mean, isn't it reasonable that the police take these measures?
I understand that, and yes, there are people that run around with guns and knives, but there are also not people that do that. So it's like, how do you get to the bottom of who does and who doesn't? I guess it will be via stop and search, but then that's based on the officer and his judgment. And they get it wrong a lot of the time. And if you are in an area where there's Caucasian, white youths, whatever, you know...
What about when they get it right? What about when they get it right and save lives?
Then that's great. But if you're in an area where there's predominantly white youths, then when you stop them, they will have knives on them as well. Is that being recorded? And that's my point. Would that come under the stop and account, as opposed to using the stop and search?
They do feature in the stats, and it is a smaller proportion of white young men that get stopped and searched compared to black men. But I would say, no matter who is stopped and searched in the street, and I did thousands of them in my time as a police officer, if you're polite but firm, you often need to be both, and you can be both. You explain your reasons. You, if need be, explain the act and section, the law under which you are carrying it out, and you remain courteous at all times. That goes a long way towards building bridges and not dismantling them. And of course, a stop of somebody in the street does not always have to end up in a search. I'd like to change the term. I'd like the police to call it observe and engage, and then, if need be, a search.
Actually, we saw a big reduction in youth murders in London last year. Is it possible that the targeted use of stop and search help those numbers?
Undoubtedly. 30 teenagers murdered in London in 2020, in 2021, I beg your pardon, 14 in 2022. Of course, 14 tragic.
Still too many, but yes.
Tragic. But that reduction is a good thing in itself, and stop and search was very much a feature.
So I just want to pick up on what you said. It should be done in a well-respected manner, explain to the young person or whoever what's going to happen. So what do you call when it's a stop and search that turns into 3 officers detaining a young person, one's kneeling in his chest, you can hear him visibly, you know, you can hear the audio like, I can't breathe, I need my mum. What do you call that? Because
Hang on a second. Are you saying that the many members of the black community still regard the Met as the enemy?
Well, when they're going to be doing stop and searches in that kind of manner where it turns into a young person can't breathe and potentially can be hospitalised because he can't breathe, then of course it's going to create animosity.
That would be abuse of police powers against any member of any community.
Of course, but I want to know what you call that, because you explained what stop and search should be, and this is what stop and search looks like now. So can you please... Nigel.
Before Peter answers that, let me just ask you.
Yeah.
What do you think the Met should try and do to stop the amount of knife crime and murders in London?
Stop everyone then. If it's a stop and search thing that you need to have in place, then stop everyone.
But if you have a borough of London where there have not been any youth murders for the last 5 years, compared to a borough or even a district in London in which there have been several, what would you do?
Stop everyone, because you never know.
I don't buy that, but, you know, OK, I understand. You can see, Peter Blexley, there is still some residual fear and suspicion of the Met. What else do they have to do? What else does the new commissioner, Mark Rowley, have to do to convince people this is the right course of action?
Neighbourhood policing. Mark Rowley spoke about that again this week, and he's committed to reinventing the wheel in that regard, and I welcome that. Community engagement is important, excuse me, but the communities that need to be engaged with are those who are victims of crime and those who perpetrate crime. If the police do that properly at all times, every community will love seeing their police on the street.
I will draw stumps on this debate. I'll thank you both for taking part of it. And it is, you know, a hugely emotive issue. It has been all my adult life. It will go on being so. Let's just hope this new boss of the Met is more effective in reducing crime than his predecessor. In a moment, we'll talk about the scandal of prepayment meters in people's homes for electricity and the sheer number of people who literally have been cut off in the last year.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you.
GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other pay-per-review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Well, some quite strong thoughts from you at home on whether Met Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley is right. Stuart says, how soon can he promise such results? How about give it a try for a given period without extensions, then view the data? Well, Stuart, all of this needs to be data-driven, I agree with you, but I think I presented you at the top of this segment with some pretty overwhelming facts. Another viewer says, yeah, right. And they said in London, well, he's absolutely right about this, that having many surveillance cameras, more than any other city in the world, would reduce crime considerably. They lied in order to reduce your rights to privacy. Do you know what, whoever you are, the more surveillance cameras there are, the more crime there is, and the more relatively innocent people are going about their lives finish up getting fined for all sorts. David says, yes, of course, he's right, but it will never happen again in our lifetimes. Don't be so sure about that. I think this new Met Police Chief is getting off to a positive start. I at least want to give him the benefit of the doubt. Now, we debate energy endlessly on this programme. We have ever since we launched. But there's always a new story. There's always a new scandal. And there's another one today. Well, I'm very pleased that Ross Clark, energy journalist who writes in The Sun and The Mail and The Telegraph and goodness knows where else, and Ross, a friend of the programme. It'll be a shock to a lot of people. They've seen this report that has come out from Citizens Advice that a stunning 3.2 million people with prepayment meters have been left with cold and dark homes at some point in the last year. Explain to us how these prepayment meters work and how they're installed.
Well, these are meters where you have to, as it sounds, you have to pay for your electricity up front rather than use the electricity and then pay for it in a bill.
And is that because you're a bad credit risk?
Well, you can probably choose to have one if you want to, but it's most cases it's because people have fell behind with their bills, and the energy companies have forced them to have a prepayment meter. And there were 370,000 households last year where prepayment meters were not just forced on them, but forced on them by court warrant. And the energy companies.
Let's just pause on that a minute,
yes, yeah,
and let it sink in for the listeners and the viewers. So 370,000 homes in this country where there was a warrant.
Yeah. So, energy company arrives at the door with warrant to enter your property, come in and forcibly remove your meter and force you onto prepayment in future. But what's really worrying about this is because the consequences of being switched onto a prepayment meter, I mean, it's, having your house basically broken into by the energy company is bad enough. But what happens then is you'll pay a higher price for your electricity than if you're on, direct debit and that sort of thing.
You pay a higher price?
You pay a higher unit price for your electricity.
So those that are the poorest in society,
who've fallen into debt because they can't afford their energy bills, they end up paying a little bit more for their...
Ross, why is nobody across the road in this building behind us in Parliament why is no one screaming about this?
I find it absolutely weird, the response of Parliament, government and opposition to the whole energy business of the past year, because, bills have gone through the roof. But, what have they done? They've said, given £400 to every single household in the country, to people, billionaires, millionaires, who do not need this money. They've given us all £400 each to help with our bills, capped all our bills, people who don't need it. And at the same time, these people who really cannot afford their bills, they've fallen through the net. And if you're on a prepayment meter, you have to buy vouchers from the shops. It's very hard. It's much harder to get that £400, bung from the government to help from your bills. So those are the people who are really being left out.
I'm also looking, Ross, at what we pay before we came on air. Basically, we pay 50% more for electricity than if we were in France or Germany. We pay double for our electricity if we were living in Australia, and we're more expensive than America. And I know we've done this before on this programme, but it bears repetition. Why is electricity in this country more expensive, so much more expensive, than our neighbours?
Yeah, well, we've got a very perverse energy market. At the moment, we switched to renewables of about 40% wind and solar, about 40% gas. And, the different mixtures. Some days in December there was 2% wind and a lot of gas. Now, wind is producing 50% and gas very little. But the way the market works is that the price paid to all the producers of electricity is fixed by the highest, the price commanded by the highest cost producer. And what happens is, wind drops away and we need extra power to go in the grid. So, the market goes out then to a gas producer who, has to charge a very high price because they're only producing electricity for a very short period of time, and the per unit cost of that producing electricity for a very short time is very high. And if that's sort of 200 pence a kilowatt hour, and the wind normally might cost 50 pence per kilowatt hour, suddenly the wind company is also receiving 200 pence per hour.
Who invented all this?
Well, this was invented when the energy market was, the energy industry, electricity industry was privatised back in the 80s, and they had to sort of invent this sort of rather bogus market because, of course, we're all getting the same electricity. You're getting the same electrons, whoever your provider is or wherever it's coming from. So they had to invent this sort of bogus market, which, in normal times might work.
So basically, we're paying more for our electricity than any other consumers in any other part of the Western world. Not just consumers, but our businesses too, many of whom close because of high energy costs. And with prepayment meters, the poorest in society are now expected to pay even more. I find the whole thing a complete scandal. Ross, final thought on all of this. There were many of us were deeply worried that come this winter, which we're now in, there could be potential outages, and National Grid was preparing us for perhaps evenings on which between 4 and 7 we wouldn't be able to get any electricity. Is the mild weather making us and the rest of Europe rather complacent at the moment?
So the mild weather is helping enormously. As I just said, about 50% of our electricity in the last few days has come from wind energy, because the wind's been blowing very strongly and reliably.
High temperatures for time,
and it's also very mild, so that reduces the heating demand, of course. But, if we swing back, and we could easily swing back into sort of weather we had in mid-December, if we get that in February, we could be in trouble again. But what has happened, and I think probably people aren't necessarily quite so aware of this, is that because of this winter we were facing this great shortage, there was huge investment around Europe in floating LNG terminals, liquefied natural gas. And we're importing a lot of this liquefied gas now from the US and from Qatar, and that's filled up a lot of the European storage facilities, and it has sort of staved off the crisis.
Yes,
and
the Germans, of course, have now got quite big stores of natural gas. We haven't. We have no facilities to do so.
Yes,
Do you see any change in government energy policy going ahead from here?
Well, I think that this energy market just has to be reformed. We've got this ridiculous situation now where government is handing out bungs to energy consumers to help with their sky-high bills. the energy companies are making huge profits, and then government is skimming off some of those profits in windfall tax. It's sort of merry-go-round of money. What we need is a properly functioning market rather than these bungs and windfall taxes.
Ross Clark, you've done as much as any journalist in this country to expose the nonsenses in our energy markets and the costs that ordinary folk are paying. Keep doing what you do, and thank you for joining us this evening. In a moment, we'll be joined by Prince Philip of Serbia. We'll talk about Djokovic, we'll talk about our royal family and what he thinks, we'll talk about the death of King Constantine of Greece this week. All of that in just a moment.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Well, I'm joined now by Prince Philip of Serbia. He's live from Belgrade, and I want to say a big welcome to the programme. Thank you for coming on.
Hi, Nigel.
Now, we've seen the death of the last king of Greece, King Constantine, who of course was a godfather of yours and linked and related, of course, to the late Duke of Edinburgh. So I'm sorry for your loss. Do you, as a member of a European royal family, do you see any prospect of monarchies returning in Europe?
I do. King Constantine was my godfather. He was also related to my father's mother, who was Alexandra of Greece, who was, she was, I believe, aunt to King Constantine. I believe that monarchies do have a time and place in the modern world that we live in. I believe that let's put it this way: that democracy, as we can see, is failing before our eyes, and I believe that monarchies have a low time preference philosophy, meaning that we're not that we don't think about doing things now and discounting the future. So basically saying that the democracy is all about instant gratification, and in every 5 years we have a new system, or they're revoted, and it's the same story over and over again without any progress. While the monarchy, decisions are made that last for the long term. Decisions are made.
That's very interesting. No, it's very interesting. It's interesting. I mean, we of course, had the loss of our Queen last September, and a massive outpouring of grief and emotion that took place in this country, and a very popular monarchy. I'm going to ask you a question that you might want to dodge, but do you think Prince Harry is doing the reputation of the British royal family the amount of harm that I think it is?
I believe, yes, I believe he is, but I also believe it's bread and circus. It's all theatre. He's making a lot of money out of it, him and Meghan. I think that's a lot. I think that's disrespectful towards the family. They said they wanted to be left alone, but here they are making $100 million Netflix shows, and then he's going on huge interviews, and now coming out with a book called Spare, which probably is some Spare. So it's probably some Freudian fantasy land in there. So it's good. It's really, I don't think it's respectful. I used to sort of relate to Prince Harry when I was younger. He had the cheeky side. It was all quite fun and everything. I had respect for him then. But since he getting together with Meghan, I had nothing wrong with Meghan. But then they became a little bit too woke, and obviously didn't respect what the monarchy actually stands for. And as I was talking before, monarchy really is about the long time preference. I mean, just low time preference thinking, philosophy that lasts for a long time. This creates unity. Yeah. This creates custom, respect. This creates continuity. And then there they are, just saying, no, me. I want it my way. I'm not respected. I'm not looked after.
I mean, look, It's disgusting. Now, Serbia. I was in Belgrade this time last year with the Djokovic family when Novak was virtually under house arrest in Melbourne. And let's hope he goes on and wins the title.
I hope so too.
A quick thought, if you could. We don't understand much about it. The Balkans has always been very complicated for British people. There are some very serious tensions on the border with Kosovo. The border's been shut between Serbia and Kosovo recently. Please tell us we're not heading back towards another Balkan war.
I hope not. Firstly, I would like to give my support to Djokovic. He is a national hero, national treasure. I fully support for what his beliefs, and he is totally right for taking a stance that he did back then, and it's proving to be even more right today with given the current situation with the excess deaths and so cool. But we're not allowed to talk about that much. But I'm sure that will be big news soon. Now regarding Kosovo. Well, I can comment on that. I think, I'm happily unvaccinated. I waited on the sidelines, wanted to see how this experiment panned out. Fine.
Yeah. So, and then now we do give balance, Philip. We do give balance to both arguments on this show. But just a quick thought, very quick thought, if I can, on Kosovo.
Sure, certainly. So Kosovo, firstly, its independence was, in my opinion, and many people's opinion around the world, that it was illegitimate. It was a unilateral decision done in 2008 that didn't really incorporate a referendum. This was done by powers such as the US, Germany, and the UK. And still to today, we have countries like Spain and Greece, Russia, India, China, and Brazil still not recognizing Kosovo's independence. Kosovo is a hugely cultural importance to Serbia. It is Serbian soil. The patriarch gets enthroned there for the last 800 years. It is very important to Serbia's sovereignty. So what's happening today, I think someone is just, let's say, rustling the bush a little bit to try and create a little bit more instability in the region. Who knows? Yeah.
Well, we're going to watch it. We're going to watch it very, very carefully. We're going to watch it very, very carefully. And at some point, Prince Philip, at some point, we're going to get you back on when you're in London, in the studio, to talk about Bitcoin, which you are a great enthusiast for. And given the current recent scandals, it maybe needs a few people to speak up on its behalf. But for now, can I say an enormous thanks for joining me tonight on GB News.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Right, a couple of quick what the Farages. Now, would you Adam and Eve it? We keep talking about American universities. Well, this time it's the University of Southern California. And the banned word now from them is, wait for it, field. Yes, no longer can you say field of study. No, no, no. You've got to say practicum. Field, they believe, can be associated in some way with slaves working in the fields. God help us, we're heading towards Orwellian newspeak. And speaking of American incompetence, President Biden, talk about a what the Farage moment. So the FBI raided Mar-a-Lago because Trump had classified documents there. They even went through Melania's knicker drawers. There was a debate as to whether Trump had legally declassified those documents or not. It now turns out that 10 classified documents from Obama's time have been found in Biden's think tank. He did not have any powers whatsoever to declassify them as vice president. So I'm waiting for the FBI raid on the White House. I'm waiting for the FBI raid on Biden's house in Delaware. Do you think it's going to happen? Not a cat's chance in hell. In a moment, I'll be joined on Talking Pints by someone called Mark Beer. Yes, Beer on Talking Pints in just a moment.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, as Prince Harry's memoir gets pulled apart by fact checkers, do you consider Spare a work of fiction? Dan will get your views before one of the world's top conservative commentators, Candace Owens, takes the Sussexes to task. Plus, is Sadiq Khan on a deranged attempt to reverse Brexit? And have the BBC proven they're anti-British by making a podcast with Shamima Begum? Join Dan, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
It's Talking Pints. I'm joined by Mark Beer, OBE. Well, fancy having a beer on Talking Pints. That's a first. Cheers. Now, Mark, successful, international, lawyer, businessman, and you've spent time working in parts of the world about which most of us know almost nothing. Tell us about Kazakhstan. You've done extensive work in Kazakhstan. You're a legal advisor to the Supreme Court there. I mean, it's a name. Most people would struggle to find it on the map, and yet things are happening there, aren't they?
They are. I mean, it's the 9th largest country in the world. It's the largest landlocked country. Amazing. It's incredible. And what most people don't know is that part of their legal system is run by Brits. Harry Wolff, who was the Lord Chief Justice here, set up an English language common law system. Lord Mance is running that now. So in terms of doing business through Kazakhstan into Central Asia, where the returns are about averaging 22% at the moment per year, which is phenomenal, the historic problem was, is it safe?
Yeah.
You know, people didn't speak Russian or Kazakh or Uzbek. But now with the English language environment that they've created, with English judges and the like, you can now access 22% returns with a safety of knowing that your business is protected.
Well, you see, don't say that we don't tell people things on this programme they haven't heard before. You've been heavily involved in the UAE, heavily involved in Dubai, places like that. So much money going there. It's unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah, it's unbelievable. It's all around the world. I think citizens are starting to get frustrated that the services that they're paying for aren't worth the money that they're paying, you know, towards them. And it's that sort of the independence, the sovereignty of the citizens coming to the rise.
The National Health Service is perfect, isn't it?
Well, it's £2,750 a person for every man, woman and child in this country. So, yes, it's a fabulous system, primary and secondary care, but £2,750 per person on value, one has to look at that. The same, you know, we could talk about ambulances now. You know, if you had the opportunity to buy an ambulance service privately, you could get it probably for less than the cost of the service that we're getting. So what's happening, Nigel, is that people are starting to look wherever they are in the world and saying, for the money I'm contributing towards the centre, am I getting a return?
No, Mark, I am seeing, you know, people in their late 20s, early 30s leaving the country, going elsewhere. Yeah. They think they're paying too much tax for too little return. It's a real problem. Your experience of business, genuinely global. Next week, it's Davos and the world, the evil World Economic Forum. Klaus Schwab, who wants to make us all poor but thinks we'll be happy. The Great Reset. Tell us about the WF very briefly.
Look, it's an institution that started as a think tank, and it's grown and it's enormously influential. And I was associated with it. I sat on their Justice Committee looking at reforms that could take place across the world that would drive economies and drive investment and drive opportunity. And it's grown into a very powerful force. But I think you probably know more about it than most.
Look, you know, I am suspicious of too many decisions being taken at a global level beyond the reach of voters. You know, that's what, for me, the Brexit thing was all about. I mean, I believe in international trade. I worked in international trade for years, but it's about that balance. And I think there is a suspicion and a feeling that big business has become just too interlinked with government and major decisions. So that, I think a lot of that suspicion is around that. But look, you know, Mark, our place in the world, we made a decision in 2016 that we'd formulate our own trade policy, make our own decisions, something that I believed for decades could be to our advantage. How do you think we're doing?
Well, it's about the implementation. The concept, fine, but the implementation has been shambolic, utterly shambolic. But that's not to say there isn't significant opportunity. Depending on the data, and it's difficult to know which is correct, but 95% of businesses in the UK don't export globally. Yeah. You know, 5% to the EU, but the rest, not really. So there is a significant opportunity into high growth markets. Central Asia, 22% returns, risk adjusted 8%. Middle East, higher than that. And we've got such talent in this country, such brilliant, such well-educated people, such phenomenal service sector, brilliant manufacturing sector, aerospace sector, and yet they're not accessing the opportunities that are available to them. And I think, you know, part of the role I see now, having come back to the UK in 2018, is helping business succeed globally, helping them to enter markets safely and to grow in those markets and make more jobs and pay more tax.
In terms of our global position, done correctly, Brexit could be a big benefit, couldn't it?
Done correctly, of course Brexit could be a big benefit.
Yeah,
but done correctly, trade is a big benefit, not only to the creation of jobs and opportunity here and the payment of tax to pay for the services here, but in terms of spreading the excellence. Look at education. Look at the phenomenal educational institutes we have here, say at a university level, and look at how well they travel around the rest of the world. And that ability of us to transplant something so special that we've grown over hundreds and thousands of years here and improve the lives of others around the world and make a bit of money doing it, it's phenomenal. But we're not doing enough of it.
No, I have to say, I've been very frustrated by the sort of inertia that I see coming from that building over there in Downing Street. Now, you are described as a futurist, as somebody who can help us sort of decode the future. Part of that future is clearly going to be blockchain, isn't it? How big a development is that?
Well, I think as barriers, boundaries and borders are going up, as tariffs are on the increase, as we're sort of deglobalising from a physical trade perspective, as governments are imposing more control into their environment than consensus. You know, it's about coercion. I coerce you to pay your taxes because if you don't, I'll punish you. And I'll coerce you to pay, you know, the tariff for importing goods.
Or I'll put a prepayment meter in your home.
Or I will issue an order to put a payment to make you pay more than anybody else, right? So as government is more about control, and as that control is driven by boundaries and borders and the tariffs that go with it, commerce will look to find a different way of doing business. And the way that they're finding is now using digital decentralized business platforms. Now, the blockchain houses cryptocurrencies, which are speculative, stable currencies, which are pegged to a fiat currency, but are still digital. But more importantly than that, you can house your contract in there. Now, if your contract is housed across 2,000 servers in 50 countries, no individual state can gain access to it and start to interfere with it and to challenge it. And you and I can now set up a company on a satellite in space. So we can have a company set up on a satellite in space, immune from the control of the nation. We can run a contract using digital assets and a digital contract on the blockchain of which no nation has control. And what does it do? It adds about 3% efficiency to the supply chain because I'm not having to deal at each border with another set of tariffs and complexities. So when we talk about blockchain in the context of Bitcoin, I'm not necessarily a fan. I think there's too much volatility in there for it to gain acceptance. But when I talk about digital currencies as a conduit to conduct business seamlessly around the world, overcoming the barriers and boundaries and borders that are on the rise.
There's huge change coming.
It's a huge opportunity.
There's massive change coming, isn't there?
Yeah.
Absolutely huge change. It's interesting. I actually think for the last 50 years, apart from the internet, we haven't really seen huge technological advances, but I suspect with AI and everything else, we're on the verge of some big stuff. All of which worries me, Mark. You know, so many jobs that people do are going to be they're just going to disappear, aren't they?
Well, it is about having a flexible workforce, isn't it? It's about having a workforce sufficiently well educated that they can adapt and adopt. There was the saying, I think it came from the World Economic Forum.
They never give up, you see.
That something like 50% of kids going into education today will do a job that doesn't exist today. That was the kind of number. It may have been more or less. But the key to it is, if we're training our children to be creative and to be flexible, and training them to think more broadly, to be adaptable, then they're likely to succeed in a world which is ever-changing and changing faster. If we continue, as we teach lawyers still today, learn historic cases, then they become essentially worthless for that knowledge, because as we've seen from ChatGPT and OpenAI, a computer is far more able to analyse vast data sets and produce an outcome.
Scary, but true.
What we offer is humanity. That's what we offer, you and I and the audience. We offer humanity, mercy, compassion. We haven't got AI to deliver that yet. So we know that robotic judges are 41%, up to 41% more accurate than human judges. That's a fact, that's proven. But what they can't do is deliver mercy.
Well, thank goodness for that.
Absolutely.
Might be a pleasure. Thank you. I've got a minute or two left. It's Farage, the Farage. Michael asks me, without the huge influx of migrants on an annual basis, would the NHS be in today's mess? To be fair, massive numbers, many millions of migrants coming into Britain. About 8 million have come in net since 2001. A lot of them are young. But if you add up the strain on housing, the NHS and all the rest of it, we have a major population and demographic crisis in this country, and no one wants to talk about it. I've got time for one more. Richard asks me, who is worse as Chancellor, Gordon Brown or Jeremy Hunt? Oh, goodness gracious me. Oh, Gordon Brown has a unique place for me, having spent 20 years as a metals dealer. When he announced that he was going to sell hundreds of tons, metric tons of gold, the exact dates on which he was going to sell them. And he sold that gold at an average price of $258 an ounce. It's currently trading at $1,850. Gordon is a moron was a very popular pop song in the 1970s. Dare I say, I thought it probably applied to that particular Chancellor of the Exchequer. I'm done for the week, but I'm back with you on Monday at 7 p.m. Have a good weekend. I'm going to hand you over now to Bev Turner.
Good evening, Nigel. Nice to see you. I wasn't quite ready there. It's been a busy day. I had my show at 10 o'clock this morning. I went and had a nap, and now I'm back on air in place of Mark Stein. Very happy to have the hot seat tonight. Stay with me, won't you? We're going to be talking about this government idea of postponing income tax if you're over 50 and going back to the workplace. Is that a good idea? We're also going to be talking about the potential row between Scotland and England over gender reassignment and spiking legislation. The government didn't go for it. Why? I'll see you in just a moment.
Good evening, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office. Turning very windy out there at the moment. It'll be blustery on Friday as well, but the winds will steadily ease, and for many, it'll be a bit of a drier day tomorrow. Still tonight, though, we've got low pressure nearby, and the isobars really squeezing together. It's turned very windy now across Northern Ireland. That wind could cause some disruption, possibly a bit of damage, and certainly some issues with ferry crossings and other public transport could be affected too. The strong winds then transfer over the Irish Sea into North Wales and parts of northern England. So again, a very blustery night here with showers coming in for most areas too. But much of the east and south will be dry, and that strong wind will stop temperatures falling too far. We start tomorrow at 4 or 5 Celsius. It'll still feel cold in that wind tomorrow morning. Plenty of showers for Northern Ireland, Wales, northwest England and northern Scotland. But much of eastern England and much of the south will have a dry day, and even the showers in the southwest should tend to fade. In fact, most places becoming dry by the afternoon, but some showers still feeding into southwest Scotland. Some sunny spells, and the winds will ease through the day, but that wind will make it feel quite chilly with temperatures 7 to 10 Celsius. More rain to come then during Friday evening, initially spreading into Wales and Northern Ireland, but another mass of rain then comes swamping in as we go through the early hours, bringing a soggy start to Saturday for the vast majority. Maybe a bit drier in northern Scotland. The rain hitting the colder air across Scotland, so some snow on the mountains. Should start to ease from Northern Ireland on Saturday morning, and then the rain tending to pull away from most places by Saturday afternoon.